Hi, July here again with the second episode in the mini podcast series. So, in the first episode, I talked a little bit about the early community moderators of the RuneScape 1 era, or at least of 2001, and we are going to stay in that general period, so in RuneScape 1. But this time we're going to have a look at the more, darker side of RuneScape, because today I'm going to talk about first about the fatigue system, followed by two bots or programs that were used to kind of circumvent the fatigue system. And once we get to that, I will explain why exactly I wanted to talk about that in this podcast, okay? Okay, so let's first explain what the fatigue system was to better understand the bot programs that existed for it. So by the end of 2002, and remember RuneScape was launched in January of 2001, so by the end of 2002, the presence of bots had become noticeable in the game, and that's kind of an understatement. So considering the unfair nature of using bots, the game developers had to do something about those bots. So their main solution came on 13th November of 2002 in the form of the fatigue system. So how did this fatigue system work? Well, bots cannot think for themselves. They are pre-programmed to carry out either one task or a set of tasks. In other words, a bot cannot respond when it is prompted to carry out a task for which it was not programmed, whereas a player can. That difference lies at the foundation of the fatigue system. The way it worked is that a player's in-game character would start to get tired after a while until it had become too tired to continue gaining XP or to continue gathering resources. So what exactly this means is that as soon as a player had reached a fatigue percentage of 100%, because that's how it was displayed on the screen, the player could no longer train any resource gathering skills. They could still do other activities or train other skills, but they just would not gain any XP. So for example, engaging in PvP, which was extremely popular at the time, could be done without any problem at a 100% fatigue rate. With that being said, two main reasons to use bots at the time were to gather in-game resources and to sell those resources to other players, and to actually train skills. But with a fatigue rate of 100%, those things could not be done anymore. So to resolve that, the character would have to rest in any of the new beds that had been placed at various locations in RuneScape, so that the fatigue rate, which was displayed in the stats interface as a percentage, would be reset to 0. Resting by using any of those beds was enough to regain the ability to train the resource gathering skills and to gain XP in any skill again. Of course, this was annoying because it means that the player needed to leave their training spot to relocate to any of the beds. So a later update in 2003 changed that by adding portable sleeping bags to the game so that the players no longer needed to relocate to those beds. The problem with that solution, however, was that also bots no longer needed to relocate, so just a sleeping bag was not going to be enough to stop those bots, which is why a second change was made to the system, and it was a change that many veteran players would never forget. So after resetting the fatigue rate to 0%, the player then needed to carry out another task, and that was entering a CAPTCHA verification code. You know, those codes that you have undoubtedly seen before on plenty of websites when creating accounts, etc., to check if you're human. But in case you still don't know what I mean, I suggest that you have a quick look in Google Images and type CAPTCHA verification code there, and then you will surely know. Anyway, so Jagex was hopeful that most bots would not be able to correctly enter those codes, whereas a real player would have no problem with that at all. As it turns out, that actually was true, as all bots did struggle with the system of CAPTCHA codes. That is why the community of bot developers came with a very creative solution, and that's because they simply had to, and that's what I'm going to explain next. By the way, there's a lot more that I could tell about the fatigue system itself, but that's beyond the scope of this podcast. What I've said so far is all you need to know to understand the fatigue bots, to which I'm going to introduce you right now. But first, so the reason that I chose this as the subject for this podcast is because when I was researching the history of RuneScape bots, which I did 2, 3, 4 years ago, I saw lots of bots that when reading how they worked, I thought, damn, that's clever. But then when I read about these two fatigue bots that I'm going to tell you about next, I was absolutely mind blown. Why? because they were more than just bots, as the bots required an active community to work. So let me tell you about it now, and note the complexity behind all of this, which makes it all the more surprising that this system worked. That's also a little heads up that this may get a little confusing, so you may want to pay a little closer attention for this next part of the podcast. Okay, so here we go. And so remember, the problem for bots was the CAPTCHA verification codes, which bots could not solve at the time. So two famous bot developers, Kaitnieks or Kaitnieks, I don't know, I think he was Estonian, so that's probably Kaitnieks. So that guy and Evil Cowgod quite creatively found a way around that by using a combination of two programs that they had written. Those two programs were Fatigue Operator and Sleepwalker. And the way in which it worked was quite ingenious. So this is how it worked. A player's Fatigue Operator and Sleepwalker were both in communication with the Fatigue Operators and Sleepwalker programs that anyone else was running. When botting without paying attention to the screen, players could keep both Fatigue Operator and Sleepwalker running, while another bot, such as RuneBot, which was a very popular bot at the time, was doing the actual botting in RuneScape, such as training, woodcutting, etc. So Fatigue Operator and Sleepwalker kind of functioned in the background more as support programs than real bots, so to support the actual bot that the player was using. Then when a player's fatigue had reached 100%, so when the moment had arrived to enter the CAPTCHA verification codes, and let's use the word cabbage as example, so cabbage as the CAPTCHA verification code, other players who were not botting, so who were actually at their screen, and who also had Fatigue Operator open, were alerted of that, so that real person who was actually at their screen received an alert that another player's bot account was stuck in a CAPTCHA code. Anyone paying attention to the screen who was running Fatigue Operator could then use Sleepwalker to type cabbage for the other player who was using, for example, RuneBot or any other bot. Now here is the truly ingenious bit behind all this. So the bot user could be helped that way only if he or she had collected so-called Fatigue Operator points to exchange, with one Fatigue Operator point given access to one CAPTCHA word. I warned you that this was going to get complicated, so I'll try to put this in other words. So before starting up RuneBot or any other bot, that same bot user needed to type CAPTCHA codes for other Sleepwalker users to collect Fatigue Operator points, with one Fatigue Operator point being gained for each word that is typed for someone else who wasn't at their screen. If a bot user had, for example, 20 Fatigue Operator points, then other players could enter 20 CAPTCHA codes for the bot user to help him or her rest 20 times by entering 20 CAPTCHA codes. And the 21st time, however, that bot user would have no Fatigue Operator points left, which means that Sleepwalker could not allow anyone to submit CAPTCHA codes for the bot user. So at that point, the bot user would get stuck at the CAPTCHA screen until he or she returned to the computer. This is how bot users would always type words for other bot users first, and then use the collected Fatigue Operator points from that to ensure that other players could enter the CAPTCHA codes while the bot user was away from the keyboard. So if you can still follow at this point, then congratulations. But if you can, then you will also understand that this was a brilliant concept, but it also meant that the use of Fatigue Operator and Sleepwalker was a large-scale community project, although it is not known how many players actually used those two programs. So for the concept to work well, however, it was necessary that at least a certain minimum number of players used both programs, otherwise there might not have been anyone to enter the CAPTCHA codes while the bot user was away. One of the programs had been named Sleepwalker because the purpose of all this was to allow players to continue botting or walking around in the game while the bot user was sleeping in real life. In other words, it was mainly meant to help out bot users at night, and when that player then woke up in the morning, he or she could spend the day gaining Fatigue Operator points while playing RuneScape and helping out other bot users by typing CAPTCHA codes for them if they were also running Sleepwalker. And then when the first guy went to bed again, the cycle began all over again, and then it went on and on. So I've always been very adamantly anti-botting, but when I learned about Sleepwalker and Fatigue Operator, how they worked in conjunction with a real bot, such as RuneBot at the time, and how they depended on the community of bot users, and that this system actually worked, I was impressed beyond words. The fact that there isn't much visual material to show about all this is why I decided to use the opportunity to talk about it in a podcast. Anyway, a weakness of Sleepwalker and Fatigue Operator is that it depended on a large enough community of bot users. So if not enough players were using those programs, then it didn't work very well. So as you can surely imagine, when RuneScape 2 was launched in 2004, which abolished the fatigue system, that was a problem for the bot users who chose to stay behind in what was then renamed as RuneScape Classic. With almost everyone making the transition to RuneScape 2, there just weren't enough people anymore for Fatigue Operator and Sleepwalker to work well enough, so that was the end of the era for that generation of Fatigue bots. The community of bot developers swiftly responded to that, however, by rolling out the next generation of Fatigue bots throughout 2004 that no longer depended on other people, such as bots like Elmo, OOCR, and WUSS. I don't know what those acronyms stand for, but that's not something for this podcast anyway. By the way, Jagex was still monitoring RuneScape Classic by then, as exemplified by a mass ban in October of 2004, in which 3,000 RuneScape Classic players were banned for using bots. So that was all that I wanted to share today about the fatigue system, the CAPTCHA codes, and the creative solution as a true community effort that bot developers presented to circumvent the CAPTCHA codes. So this was a little bit of a complicated topic, so I hope that you were able to follow all of this. If not, then maybe listen to it once more. This is also the first time that I have talked about bots on this channel, and then I mean as the main topic of a video. So I don't know if this was interesting to you guys at all. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a quick thumbs up and perhaps share it with your friends. That would really help me and this channel. Alright, so thank you for listening. I am July and I hope that you will come back for more.